Buck Rogers is a fictional space opera character who was first introduced in the novella Armageddon 2419 AD, authored by Philip Francis Nowlan, which was published in the August 1928 issue of Amazing Stories. In the earliest Buck Rogers adventures, the character is depicted as a veteran of the Great War, who falls into a state of suspended animation following a cave-in at a radioactive mine. With each literary incarnation, the origin of the character changes, but one common thread that is weaved through all the different mythologies is that Buck Rogers remains in suspended animation for 500 years. When Buck awakens in the 20th century, he finds Earth being ruled by a tyrannical dictator named Killer Kane, so Buck teams up with Lieutenant Wilmer Deering to save the world. Over the decades, the character of Buck Rogers has seen great success in comic books, and was also the lead character in one of the most popular serial films of the 1930s. Starring Buster Crabbe, who also played the role of Flash Gordon a few years earlier, the original Buck Rogers serial was a swashbuckling space adventure that thrilled the audiences of the day. Over 40 years later, Buck Rogers became a star of the small screen with a hit new television show called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. Inspired by the success of Star Wars, Universal Studios produced a feature-length pilot episode and 2 seasons of the show, which aired between 1979 and 1981. The show starred Gil Gerard in the title role and Erin Gray as Colonel Wilmer Deering. And while children waited for the next Star Wars sequel to be released in theatres, this show helped to feed their insatiable appetite for space adventure and introduced Buck Rogers to an entirely new generation. I'm not a huge collector of Buck Rogers toys. In fact, the only item in my collection is my treasured Buck Rogers lunchbox. So for this episode, I've called in an expert and lifelong Buck Rogers fan, Toy Polloi.
When people start collecting Buck Rogers, they tend to go for the more obvious things like the Mego 3 3/4 inch figures and spaceships, or the larger 12-inch dolls, because those are the sort of things that draw people into the franchise. But I like to collect some of the odder items that you don't generally tend to associate with the Buck Rogers movie or TV series.
So with the help of Toy Polloi, let's get started with our top 10 countdown of the best Buck Rogers toys, and some other oddities. Hello Buck Rogers fans, my name is Tony, and kicking us off in the number 10 slot is the 3 3/4 inch Buck Rogers action figure from Mego. Inspired by the Buck Rogers TV show from the late 70s, and hot on the heels of Kenner's wildly successful range of 3 3/4 inch Star Wars action figures, the Mego Toy Company introduced a range of Buck Rogers action figures that were produced in the same scale as the Kenner figures. But the Mego offerings featured far more articulation than the Star Wars figures. A total of 8 different characters were produced, with the Buck Rogers figure being particularly well designed. However, his lack of a pistol accessory is the reason he doesn't rank higher on this list.
One of my favourite items is something I found at a car boot sale, and that is this Bluebird Buck Rogers lemon and lime fizz sweet jar. And this is not the sort of thing you would actually expect to sort of have anything to do with Buck Rogers, because basically Bluebird have thought a great way to get kids to buy more sweets is just to stick the Buck Rogers logo on the front of it. Now, I don't remember Buck buying lemon and fizz sweets at all, or eating any sweets in the series, but they thought it was a good idea. And something like this, you're not really going to find that often. I picked this up at a car boot sale, and nowadays I just use it to hold spare action figures.
Taking the number 9 slot on this list is the extremely rare Buck Rogers Chemical Laboratory, produced by the Gropper Manufacturing Company. This set was produced in 3 different sizes, and today they are amongst the most sought after pieces of Buck Rogers merchandise. The set comes with a box with a gorgeous lid that features some extremely vibrant artwork depicting Buck, Wilmer and Dr. Huer performing chemistry experiments. The contents of the box include glass test tubes, litmus and a number of small cardboard vials containing a number of different chemicals. Certainly not a toy that would ever be sold to children today, but the Buck Rogers Chemical Laboratory has an antique charm that I just love. And number 8 on the list of the best vintage Buck Rogers toys is the Buck Rogers Flight Helmet and Starfighter set. The Buck Rogers Flight Helmet is another toy inspired by the TV show, and it is designed to look just like the helmet that Buck wears when he's piloting his starfighter. Produced by HG Toys, the helmet came packaged with a scaled down model of Buck's starfighter, and with this helmet, a child could act out any number of exciting space adventures.
And what child after watching Buck Rogers wouldn't want to have a go on a puzzle? And that's exactly what they produce, puzzles. These are from Whitman, and these are frame tray puzzles. They've only got about 10 pieces in them, so they're incredibly simple puzzles. And the artwork on them is fantastic. It's sort of cartoon versions of Buck and Wilma and Tweaky. My only sort of strange concern with this is that on one of them you see a draconian ship exploding in the background, and judging by the age that these puzzles are aimed at, that doesn't seem quite appropriate.
And coming in at number 7 on the list is the Walking Tweaky action figure from Mego. In the Gil Gerard TV show, the Tweaky character was Buck Rogers' lovable robot sidekick, who also carried a sentient computer named Dr. Theopolis around his neck. And the best toy incarnation of this character came from Mego's 12-inch range of Buck Rogers action figures. Today, wind-up toy mechanisms are a thing of the past, but in 1980, Mego used one such device to give their Tweaky action figure a wind-up walking feature. And coming in at number 6 is the wind-up Buck Rogers rocket ship from 1934. The Marx Toy Company produced this wonderful tinplate Buck Rogers rocket ship over 70 years ago, and finding a mint example today will certainly cost you.
No Bucks, no Buck Rogers.
Marx also produced a Buck Rogers Rocket Police Patrol toy in 1939, but the company's best offering remains the first issue rocket ship from 1934.
As with any great TV show, there's bound to be annuals and other sort of collectible books, but with Buck Rogers, my favourite item is the Buck Rogers pop-up book. Now this is aimed at a very young audience, probably sort of 5 or 6 year old, and it is made by Random House. Just opening the first page, you get the rocket blasting off. It's really a fun book, and the fact there's so much going on, so many little things to do in each page, it's just a work of art. It really is a lovely item to have in a collection. It recreates the story of the first 2 episodes of the Buck Rogers TV show in a very sort of basic form with little bits of action and explosions going on, but it's certainly a nice little addition to any Buck Rogers collection.
Taking the number 5 slot on this list is the Buck Rogers Land Rover from Mego. Ripped directly from the Buck Rogers in the 25th Century feature-length pilot, the Land Rover is designed for use with the aforementioned 3 3/4-inch action figures produced by Mego. This vehicle is not only the best one offered in the Mego line, but also the rarest. If you're going to collect one, make sure it has both solar panels and the easily lost spotlights. As we get closer to the top slot, the number 4 entry is beyond vintage. Here we're in the realms of antiques, with the Buck Rogers Atomic Pistol. Some say that the 1934 release of the Buck Rogers ray gun was the item that launched the era of pop culture merchandising. And when a toy looks this good, how could you deny that? Before Captain Kirk, Han Solo or Buzz Lightyear, there was Buck Rogers in the 20th century, and his weapon remains one of the coolest sci-fi sidearms in existence. And this atomic ray gun even featured on the cover of the Foo Fighters' debut album in 1995.
Another item in my collection doesn't really have a great deal to do with Buck Rogers, but just has some Buck Rogers merchandising stuck on top of it, is the kit form lampshade from Scanlight. Now this is a very sort of odd item, doesn't really scream to me anything about Buck Rogers. It's just a lampshade made out of petals, and you can see they've stuck on the sort of standard bit of Buck Rogers artwork on the front of it, and they obviously thought the same at the time, that this probably wasn't a big seller. So not only did you get the lampshade, you got a free Buck Rogers poster within the package, just to make it slightly more exciting and slightly more interesting for a child to buy and have in their room.
Clocking in at number 3 is one of my personal favourites, the Buck Rogers Starfighter from Corgi Toys.
As a child, I got into watching Buck Rogers mainly because I'd watched Star Wars and really enjoyed it, and there were not that many things on TV that were sort of sci-fi related. It started out as Battlestar Galactica, and I really loved that, and then Buck Rogers came along, which was just a little bit more of a cheesy show, a little bit more light-hearted, and I didn't really have any toys at the time to sort of play with it. I had a Corgi Starfighter like this one here, and that was the only thing I had for the show. I didn't actually know there were other toys available for the Buck Rogers sort of franchise.
And taking the number 2 slot on this list is the Buck Rogers Captain action figure from the Ideal Toy Company. So far, the Captain Action uniform and equipment sets from the Ideal Toy Company have made 5 appearances and a total of 6 top 10 lists, and the Captain Action Buck Rogers set makes it 6 out of 7. This outfit, designed for use with the 12-inch Captain action figure, depicts Buck Rogers in his classic astronaut outfit. Before we reveal our top pick, let's take a look at the last two Buck Rogers oddities from the Toy Polloi collection.
Now, if you watch Buck Rogers, you probably wanted to reenact being Buck Rogers, and to help you with that, you could buy the Buck Rogers official utility belt by Remco. Now, this is a 6-item pack, although the pack really only does contain 4 items. You get the gun, you get a watch, which isn't really a watch because it just has a sticker on it, a belt, and some paper goggles. The other 2 items are just bits you cut out of the box and can use the goggles with. So it's not the greatest set, but it does mean that at least you get a gun and can recreate being Buck Rogers. And if you want to go the full hog, then you would have to also buy the play suit produced by Cheryl. Now, this is again nothing really to do with Buck Rogers, it's just a grey suit with a Buck Rogers logo stuck on it, but if you combine that with the gun, you'd sort of be halfway there.
And so coming in at number 1 is the Buck Rogers Starfighter from American toy company Mego. Buck Rogers toys have come a long way over the last century. From being the first piece of pop culture merchandise ever offered, they then filtered into the now ubiquitous action figure market, with Mego's 1979 release of 3 3/4-inch Buck Rogers action figures. This complete range of toys may not have achieved the same level of global popularity as the Star Wars toys they were imitating, but Mego did produce a decent enough collection, and the undeniable star of the range was the Buck Rogers Starfighter action figure vehicle. While a little flimsy, this toy was very accurate to its on-screen counterpart, and Mego also advertised that it had been authentically styled from official Buck Rogers blueprints. And it's this attention to detail that makes the Mego Buck Rogers Starfighter the number 1 toy on this list. So that's our list of the top 10 best Buck Rogers toys. I'd like to say a massive thanks to Toy Polloi for their contribution to this video, and you'll find links to other Buck Rogers reviews from Toy Polloi in the description below. So that's all for this episode. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.